Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast, presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the MitsuTimes podcast. My guest today is Rob Dupree. He is the owner and driver of a very cool, very unique 1G. Rob, how are you today, sir?
Doing just fine. Lovely day out here in Wisconsin. The sun's out and cold as hell, but spring is coming.
Spring is coming. It's right around the corner.
God, I hope.
Well, Rob, I've been around DSM since I was 16 years old, and I don't think that I've ever seen a rally DSM physically in my entire life. So I'm just so curious as to how you got into this rallying with this platform and what kind of drew you to rallying as opposed to other motorsports that DSM seem to be more popular doing.
Sure. I suppose my involvement in motorsports is going to be a little bit of a history thing here, where growing up, there were no car people in my family. It just wasn't a thing, other than transportation. And then in high school, I decided I wanted to be an exchange student. And so I went through the program, ended up being an exchange student over in Germany, where I happened to fall in love with a book about Group B rally cars in a bookstore in Germany. Great pictures, and it happened to be written in both English and German and Italian, oddly enough, so that I could kind of read it and understand what was going on. That lit a small fire that much later on, early in my career, turned into essentially becoming friends with somebody in the Audi community, because I tended to be favored towards Audi as a brand. And that person, a guy named Scott, was, and still largely is, very instrumental as a motorsports mentor through the years. It was through his prodding and tutelage and sometimes crap giving that went from driving as a student at road courses to then instructing at road courses to then he was a crew chief for a guy named John Reck, who was campaigning an Audi Works Group A car. And Scott at one point said, "Hey, we need a tire monkey to get the tires on the roof of the van and off the roof of the van and do tire changes." And that's where rally started for me.
Okay.
From there, it went to being part of the service crew, to a co-driver couldn't make it. So again, Scott had the driver say, "Well, Rob can do basic math. He can afford a helmet and a suit. So let him co-drive." And that led to the first rally with the driver, John Reck. Okay. Way back in the SCCA days.
Wow.
Yeah. That was early. Gosh, I'd have to go back. I think early 2000s. Now, there's not much DSM content in that, except for back then, some of the top guys were still running DSMs. They were still prevalent. So that was back in right as Evos were still really exotic. So, Evo 3s, 4s, 5s, you could occasionally see them. Paul Schwinier was running a Tiburon that was all, DSM or Evo underneath. I'm never really quite sure what that was. And then some of the other drivers were still campaigning and actively, doing DSMs. So they were kicking our butts. So I recall them being fast little cars. But that's really where the first time gravel roads and me and DSMs all crossed paths.
Okay. So rally came first and DSMs came second.
They did. I remember the first time I saw a DSM. I probably still sound jealous to this day, but I was in high school when these things came out, and I remember a couple of the rich kids at school, a boyfriend, girlfriend, their parents got the matching Eclipse GSX turbos, and those were the hottest cars in the parking
Wow.
lot.
Yeah, those would have been the cool kids in my school for sure.
Yeah, they boy did they show me up in my '77 Oldsmobile Delta '88.
So we're seeing some DSMs and some DSM adjacent cars rallying, kind of alongside you. Where
Mhm.
do you jump into the 1G DSM and the story behind choosing that platform?
Sure. So there's a little more history in order to get to that point. So I rallied when I lived in the Midwest, upper Midwest, so Michigan, Illinois, that stuff, and then uh, uh, my career took me to Texas, among other places, and so being in Texas, I got out of rally because the distance to tow to any races was just so large than the amount of time involved. I couldn't get into it.
Right.
Um, I was back into kind of road courses and track use and all that sort of stuff. Then, when my career brought us back north, uh, I was, we live in a little harbor town right here off Lake Michigan, and I was not, or rather, that's where we moved to, and I was really quite in love with the idea of, hey, I want to get a sailboat. And to my partner's credit, he said, well, look, you can do that anytime, but didn't you used to rally? And I said, yeah, I used to rally. He goes, well, don't you want to do it anymore? Well, I would. He said, well, don't you think you should do that maybe before you're too fat and old to get over a roll cage? And I said, so are you giving me permission to buy a race car? He said, well, it's your money, but yeah, sure, go do that. So that started, and this would have been right in 2020. We moved up here basically right at the start of COVID. And that turned into, oh, well, heck, I can buy a race car. Now, I had a couple of rally cars of my own, and I always bought towards the budget end of the spectrum because I I view racing as you need to be willing to walk away from the investment because you turned it into a big crumpled up ball of aluminum foil.
Hmm.
Um, so the race cars I had owned were always sort of less than 10 grand. Um, but anyway, that started a search, and somehow I got wind of a DSM that was for sale, and I think it was like a Facebook marketplace or a whatever one of the boards was indicating, where rally cars were for sale, and I don't even remember exactly how I came across it, but called the guy, said, I'm a buyer. It was a white and blue thing. I think the car ended up in Detroit. And the guy selling it goes, well, you're second in line, and the guy first in line, he's already on his way. So I'm pretty sure it's sold. Crap. Okay. He goes, but my boss also has a DSM rally car. It's more money, but it was built by John Buffum,
Oh.
who in rally terms is a bit of a U.S. rally legend, or a bona fide U.S. rally legend, I should really say. And it's a name I recognize and a shop I recognize. So I said, okay, well, tell me about it. And he tells me about this car a little bit. And he goes, but the guy that owns it, Matt, he's on vacation right now. So I'll have him call you when he gets back. And subsequently, Matt called me and talked me through the car, and it's a car with significant rally history.
Okay.
Being it was started off life as a Paul Rossi IMSA Firehawk car. So it was a body in white competition car from day one.
Wow.
And then, so Paul Rossi raced it for a year, and then Carl Merrill bought it and sent it to John Buffum and said, convert it to rally spec. And at that time, Mitsubishi was still offering contingency money and things. That Mitsubishi was a branded participant of U.S. Rally.
Yeah.
So running a Mitsubishi was a thing back then. And so the car was originally a 1GA. It's a 1GA VIN that later then they had to facelift update to keep it in the contingency money.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that it became a 1GB in the front end. Then Carl had just a brutal wreck with it. It was the last time he raced it, and it was sent to Murray in Illinois, which ran a company called TAD Motorsports, and blah blah blah. It went through Carl Merrill to Henry Joy to Carl Redner to this guy Matt Hookey up in Marquette, and it had all the logbooks and all the history. And Matt ultimately agreed to sell it to me at a pretty reasonable price. It had been sitting there. He had uplifted to a Subaru and wasn't exactly in love with that Subaru car either. And now he's running a U.S. a trophy truck in U.S. Rally, like a pre-runner thing. So we're all kind of crazy. But that's the history of that particular car. And subsequently, I didn't really know much about DSM life at the time I bought it. What I saw was a race-built car that was caged and logbook and had all of the all of the things I would recognize from albeit 30 plus year old, but a pro-built rally car. So I thought, well, this is awesome, and grabbed it home, or put it on the trailer, drove it home. It was a U-Haul trailer, and I proceeded to break the driver's side control arm, taking it off the trailer because I didn't know my buddy had put a safety chain on there. So that was the start of my I might break things on this car adventure.
Broke it before you even got it off the trailer.
Correct. It made getting it off the trailer rather exciting, but yeah. So it's the car. I've got to double check my numbers, but I believe we are on official rally race 97.
Wow.
And my goal is to get it to race 100, because then there's very few cars, if any, that have maintained that long of a continuous competition history.
And even less DSMs that have done that.
Well, yeah, the set of DSMs that people crazy enough to do this are pretty small. I think there's maybe 3 of us competing in U.S. Rally right now. There's Dave Matheson down south, like Tennessee-ish area, I think. And then there's a guy named Jim out on the West Coast. And I think we're the last 3 people running these things.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy, but
it's very, very crazy. So the car is purpose built. It's been through a couple people, makes its way to you. And when do we get our first race with this car? Where do we go from unloading it off the trailer and breaking that lower control arm to now we're in our first event?
So got it home. I had to do a couple of things for small updates for mounting a main central fire suppression system, because the rules had changed since the last time Matt had raced it. I had to refresh the belts and do some other things that are typical race currency update type things you have to do. Then an old longtime Audi buddy of mine, a guy named Mike, I called him up and said, hey, I bought this freaking rally car. You want to be my co-driver? And Mike said, oh, yeah, sure. What the hell? I'll give it a try. So I actually gave Mike my old racing suit, and he's a shorter guy. So one of the requirements of this particular car is the co-driver space is not all that big. So you had to be a shorter person in order to fit over in that side, a shorter and skinnier person. So Mike fit the bill perfectly. So I gave him the suit. He bought his own helmet. He, had the suit adjusted so it would fit him. And we set our sights on Snowdrift. And I think it was 2021. It's either 2021 or 2022. And we went out to Snowdrift, and I bit off more than I could chew in that race, if I'm dead dog honest. I was relying on all my former race experience at rallies to carry us through, and didn't really grasp the logistics of having crew and getting it all there and doing it all with one co-driver who knew nothing and a crew guy who knew nothing. The crew guy ended up being one of my other sports I do is I crew for somebody on a sailboat that races on the big lake.
Okay.
And so the guy that owns that boat said, well, I can drive your service truck for you. And so he's helped out. So we go to Snowdrift, we race, learned a bunch of hard lessons, which I'll try to make real brief. Number one is, if you don't have your Hans device actually on your body when you get to the start line, it turns out they're not going to let you start. That seems. And a Hans device, for people that don't know it, is a head and neck restraint device. It's a kind of a halo collar that sits on your shoulders and connects to your helmet, and it keeps basically your brain on top of your spine in a big crash. And when you go through tech, you have to show them you have all this stuff, and everything was great. And for whatever reason, I put Hans in the trailer, and then when came time to go start the race, I got in the car with a helmet, and off we went. Totally left the Hans behind. It wasn't a requirement when I raced in the 90s. So I wasn't used to that. So we got DNF'd 6 inches before the start line of the race. Goodness. DNF being a did not finish or disqualified. That was a bit tough. According to the way rally works, you can remedy the situation and re-enter but not run for any points. So that's what we did at the first service. And we proceeded to race. And then I learned the next really hard lesson, which was at Snowdrift. And Snowdrift is run in Atlanta, Michigan in late January, early February. So it's a snow ice race. That if you have snow tires, you're going to have flats. And we have one spare in the car. And we went through that, and then we had another flat, and then we had another flat, and then we just burned through tires like it was unbelievable.
No way.
And the funniest part was, and I'll try to wrap up the Snowdrift story, was at that point we had flats, we'd had problems, we'd had all this stuff, and we came to the last service, and the car was just bleeding power steering fluid everywhere, and I basically had the temper tantrum of a 3-year-old. And Tom, the guy that was my service guy, very calmly goes, well, do you have the stuff to make a line? And I said, stomping around like an upset 3-year-old. I said, yes. And he goes, do you know how to make the line? I said, yes. He goes, we have the time. I said, yes. He goes, well, just make the effing line. And the way he said it so matter of fact, I looked at him like, hey, okay, I guess you're right. And so, grab the AN line out of the trailer and the spares, because at least I knew enough to bring spares. Made a new line, we chucked it on there, filled it up, and poof, off we went and raced. And it was a good first lesson for, resiliency and what we need to do to run an older car.
Sure.
But that's where it all started. And then Mike raced with me through the next kind of 5-6 races. We did Southern Ohio. We were the only open class car to finish that race. There's a bit of a funny story, because we had a few things. When we did the Snowdrift race, neither Mike or I had ever done what's called recce, where you write all these stage notes.
Okay.
You understand. That's where we make the notes about what the course is. So then Mike went off to co-driver school in between the two races, came back. And so we were first learning how to do recce on this particular race at Southern Ohio Forest Rally. And there's a unique language to making recce notes. And if this is getting too far off the field, tell me to shut up. But
No. I always find this interesting when I watch rally videos, how it's almost like a different language.
It is very much so. So there's a bit of a formula. The first hardest thing is finding that language that makes sense to you as the driver, to say to the co-driver, for them to write down, to be able to read back to you, to feed into your driver brain what the heck is going to happen next. And Mike and I were kind of caught up in the minutia of, is that thing 100 yards away or 60, and is that a 4 or a 4.5 turn to severity, and is all the little stuff. And we hit this huge rut that ran all the way across the road. And in the recce, we were doing recce in our tow vehicle, the big old diesel. So it goes bouncing along, and I'm like, what the heck? Hey, write a note that says thingy. Here's the mile marker. And we'll come back to that. Of course, we never did. We finished making all our notes, and we go, everything's ready, and Mike tidies everything up, and we go racing the next day, because you race on rally typically on a Friday and a Saturday. And in many races, you run the same stage a couple of times in 2 different points of the day, and light and dark and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But we're doing okay. Our notes are somewhat okay as we're learning through this. And we're in a fast section, and the car's cruising. And all of a sudden, we hit this. I never saw it. I still, to this day, have never seen it. We hit this thing, and the nose of the car jumps up in the air, slams down, and then the back end pogos up, and we're sort of on the 2 front wheels.
Oh, my gosh.
And it gets back on the ground. We figure out we're still running, we're still okay, so we're still driving, because that's rally. And if you're not bleeding and it's not on fire, you go. And we get to the end of the stage, and we go through the time control, we get our time card, and now you're on the transit to the next stage. And I look at Mike and go, what the hell was that thing? It's kind of mile marker such and such. And he's looking back through his notes, and he goes, oh, that was thingy. I'm like, thingy? He goes, yeah, we didn't know what the hell to call it. I'm like, oh, well, okay, now we know what thingy means. Let's just keep with the word. Thingy is that big bump. Fine. So we do the next few stages, go to service, come back out. We're doing the next round through. And we were so focused on thingy, there was a smaller bump. Turns out to be about 25 yards in front of where thingy was. So Mike very confidently called thingy. Right as we go sailing over to him, like, oh, that wasn't nothing. And then kabam, we sky the car again. Because, well, we didn't have thingy located correctly in our notes. So it's a bit funny when you watch rally videos and you hear these, descriptions. It's inside, over crest, through brow, over, pick whatever the phrasing is. That's as you begin rally, you're evolving just to say, okay, my notes need to tell me where the road is going to go. Then as what they call the speed factor. It's sort of your handicap. As your speed factor increases based on your performance, then the notes become more about, well, how do you want to set the car up in terms of kind of the amount of yaw, the amount of power, and maybe what gear you want to be in as you approach that next thing that you're describing. And then I'm just beginning to get a glimpse. My speed factor now is in mid 50s, and the fast guys are kind of 70, the really fast guys. The top 10 cars in any given race. Mm-hmm. They're somewhere between sort of 70 and 100. And when you start off, you're 0. And I'm now getting to the point where I can see that to become a 60 or a 70 speed factor driver, you not only have to know where the road's going to go and how you want the car to set up, but precisely where on the width of the road, the crown of the road, how much you want to cut that corner, how much risk you're willing to take. And then the hardest part of all for me anyway is, to say for a 3, which is kind of a 90-degree turn, a third, a gear, a rounded-ish corner, but it's basically a 90-degree that you could take in third gear flat out. So 1s, 2s, 3s are pretty easy. 5s and 6s are pretty easy. But taking a 4 rated turn in the top of 4th gear with your foot flat to the floor is a level of belief that I'm not sure I'm ever going to achieve that. That is huge risk for huge reward, admittedly, but huge risk.
Yeah.
Sorry, that got pretty rally nerdy techie.
Oh, no. That's what I like to hear, the kind of inside baseball stuff that you would never get to hear otherwise.
It's a pretty fascinating thing. With the different co-drivers I've had since Mike, I've ridden with a few different people, but probably the best 2. One is a Canadian woman named Betsy Wen out of BC, who is magnificent at this. And then the gentleman that's currently co-driving with me, Kevin Dobrowolski, he's equal to Betsy. They are both fantastic enablers of allowing me to revert to my core self in rally. It's actually a bit of a running joke in our team, because the second we depart towards a race, from home, now you're going to go commute 8 hours to get to the race and do all that stuff. I revert to a Neanderthal, thumb driver, swipe card, go fast. That's my role. Pay for it, go fast, but everybody else is there. The team exists to facilitate that mission. And I could not do this without a team of people that I trust and have confidence in, feel safe with, absolutely believe in their capability, between the co-driver and the crew chief and the other guys helping on the crew. Like that squad of people is what makes rally possible. Yeah, the cars are cool, and drivers probably get a little more glory than they should in this, but it is the team functioning that way that really lets this work. And that's both at the race and pre-race prep and post-race, what did we break, and everything in between. It's absolutely a team sport.
Yeah, I guess that's something you really don't think about from the outside is, you see the driver's name on the window, but you don't think about the people in the pits.
Yeah. I've had to, so last year the real quick version is we ended up with the championship in our class in the central region, which was a mission we started off for, but with a crash at the beginning of the year, I thought, well, there goes our chances. And we'll probably get into that story a little bit later. But this year, 2026, I'm trying to balance how much, how many races do we want to do and what's the expense and all that stuff. I had already decided we were not going to try to defend the title, not do so many races. But I have a real concern coming to the team element. I have a real concern that I need to do enough to keep that core group of people interested enough and engaged, because I have such a high reliance on them, and changing out individuals reduces your confidence. It is so absolutely vital, way more so than I ever grasped in my younger years. So anyway, I probably got a bit preachy, but
no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, I suppose getting back to sort of Mitsubishi flavored things, the car. So It was actually with Betsy. And I think we were probably 100-acre woods the first year she and I ran it together, where I ultimately ended up blowing up the engine due to a really poor choice. But the car's name, we have named it Uncle Iro. And for those of you that are young enough to have been, familiar with the Avatar Airbender stuff, it is definitely referring to Uncle Iroh, the Dragon of the West. I refer to him as a friendly but extraordinarily capable older Asian gentleman who you wouldn't know it necessarily by looking at him, but he can do far more, is far more competitive than you would ever give him credit for. And that is the DSM in a nutshell. It's not without its faults. It's not without its limitations. This particular car, the engine and driveline is all Evo 2 RS.
Oh, no.
So Japan spec, the slightly different ring and pinion ratios, etc., which make finding parts really fun.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
The transmission is still a synchro mesh, H pattern box. Tim Zimmer of TMZ, he's built that transmission for me a number of times. And a funny story: the first time he built it for me, he convinced me to do a number of upgrades, which were absolutely the right things to do. And we made a choice to put a Quaife front differential in. And Tim had on his shelf, for reasons I still don't know, the last TAD modified center viscous couple that had never been used. So we had this rally grade, as much as we could get in the US, but basically a Mitsubishi Motorsports type viscous couple available. So he sold me that part. And then, rebuilt the transmission, did all that stuff. I think I drove it 2 races and, crunched the synchros again. I think Tim's had to go into that box 3 times for me, which I finally, on the 3rd time, and this will show you how stubborn DSM people can be, or at least me as a DSM guy can be. It took me 3 times before I finally took the car to Tim instead of just the transmission and said, okay, something here's not right. I don't break transmissions in all the years I've done other motorsport stuff. What the hell am I doing wrong? And it turned out to be the right lever, the right cables, but slightly the wrong arms on the shafts on the transmission to interact with those levers and cables. And not being a Mitsubishi guy all my life, I wouldn't have known. Audis were big, solid rod type stuff. And since then, we've not had a transmission problem since.
Wow.
It's there's these little tribal knowledge things, and Tim could just look under the hood and go, well, those aren't the right. If that's your shift knob and those are your cables, those are the wrong, little bent pieces of steel, and could source the right ones and from his experience and put it in.
I think Tim has forgotten more about these cars than most of us will ever know.
Yeah, Tim's he's an amazing resource to have access to, and happens to be almost dead set in the middle between the distance between my home and the rally shop, rally.build over in Madison, that does all the prep work on the car for me. That was the other thing I did as I got into this. I decided that while I'm a good mechanic and capable and, raised on, if you think Mitsubishis are unreliable, try maintaining old Audis. So I was raised on all that stuff. But I decided that if we were, as we got a little more serious and speed factor started going up, I wanted somebody else to look at the car and make sure it was safe and not be, if they're getting paid for it, I know that they're going to actually go check every bolt and paint mark everything and make sure it's all tight. And so Colin Schulz runs a business called Rally.build in Madison. And he has a prep business that I think he does under the moniker of 608 Motorworks. And he absolutely keeps that car, um, you know, fit and fighting trim, or we try to anyway. But the car itself is that we run. There's nothing super exotic in the engine. It's I don't know what cams are in it. Some of this is, you know, tribal knowledge has been lost through the years, and the various owners. Um, but we run a big 16G turbo. We have to breathe through a 36 millimeter inlet restrictor that's right there in front of the turbine blades,
Oh, no
the
kidding.
compressor blades, and we're limited to two bar absolute. So basically, 14.7 pounds of boost is our upper boost limit by the rules.
Wow.
We're running that in what's called the limited four-wheel drive category now. What we learned through the first couple of years of competition was that the car was 70 kilos heavier than the minimum weight for an open class four-wheel drive car. And the only 70 kilos we could find to save would be if I didn't get in the car. So that wasn't going to work. Um, so we looked at the other classes, which actually had better competition anyway. And so we classed the car into limited four-wheel drive, which we actually have to now add 100 and what do we carry? We carry 130 pounds of ballast weight in order to make the minimum weight for that class.
Oh, wow.
Yep. But you know, along the way, we've had to do a number of things. So as I went through different co-drivers, it became pretty obvious that the population of co-drivers have a requirement for halo seats. And for your listeners that may or may not know, race seats have gone through a number of iterations, but you know, race seats that get bolted into race cars, you know, they have fixed backs and they have all these support structures in them. And in the last decade or so, halo seats, which have a literal kind of halo horns that come forward, they keep your head where the Hans keeps your head over your shoulders in a frontal collision. The halo keeps your head from extending too far left or right as the car's rolling laterally or you know, going other places. So the combination of systems means you're a lot safer. But as any of your DSM drivers will know, anything above your shoulders in a DSM, the space gets really tight really fast.
For sure.
And once you add a roll cage, that's even worse. So when we've had a couple of major refits. One was the engine, which we did twice because I was an idiot. I'll get back to that story in a bit. But the more recent was converting the car to be able to accommodate halo seats, which meant we had to put a new floor in for both the driver and the passenger.
Okay.
And I'm a 6 foot, and yours makes no difference, but a 250 pound guy. I'm not exactly small. So it's a pretty big seat. And what we had to do was actually drop the floor an inch and a half
Oh, wow.
and then move it inboard 6 inches so that the tunnel side of the seat pan is basically a quarter inch off of the drive shaft.
No kidding. Wow.
Um, and that allowed us to. We tried putting the seat in normally, and it was at such cattywampus angles that basically my my gas pedal knee was pointed at the driver's side mirror in order for my foot to be able to get towards the gas pedal. It was impossible to drive.
Yeah.
But once we did all that, it created enough room to get the seat low enough and inboard enough to be straight onto the steering wheel with all of the required safety gear. But we had to do that to both sides. That was a pretty big change to the structure of the car.
I mean, you're basically reworking the interior of the car itself.
Yeah, we're the shift knob is in the stock location, but not a hell of a lot else is. The exhaust, when Buffum built the car originally, they opened up the floor pan and brought the exhaust over the rear axle structures in the back.
Sure.
So there's a half moon shape that creates the space for that. The where the spare tire would have gone, that was all cut out in a 15-gallon fuel cell. It's mounted back there under a big bulkhead.
Right.
When we rebuilt the engine, because it got pretty tired, and it was running a 1990s era Motec engine management,
Mm-hmm.
which, despite all my calls to Europe and anywhere else I could think of, nobody could find the controller keypad to be able to interact with the Motec to see what was going on.
Oh my gosh.
And so I said, okay, we're gonna commit. So we uplifted we did the whole engine rebuild and bearings and blah blah blah, all that fun stuff, and then replatformed it to use a Haltech Elite 2500 engine management and a IC7 display. So I got rid of all of the old gauges, and it's a much more simplified cockpit, and much better controls. We converted it to e-throttle or an electronic throttle body, and I think it's a 3-channel boost controller. But again, we have to live with our boost limits. And there's a funny little side story there, which was we were struggling with it over boosting all the time, and it was finally Colin and I. It was probably 2:00 in the morning in Madison. I said, okay, well, let's get some wire, and we wired the wastegate open 100% of the time. Took the car out for a drive, and starting from a dead stop, we were still making 17 pounds of boost with the wastegate open 100% of the time, 100% of the way. So the turbo was way outflowing the hot side housing, which we ultimately solved by porting the living snot out of that thing. It's all these little things you learn along the way. The car makes great power. It's got a great power band. It's super drivable between the Quaife in the front, the modified viscous, and then the LSD in the back. You can do yaw changes with the car on gravel at speed by just kind of moving your big toe.
Wow.
It's super responsive to transient changes. I don't have a fly off handbrake handle like you see guys pulling to make the car do Scandinavian flicks, because I didn't learn to drive a Scandinavian flick that way, and it just does what I want it to. It's compared to older front engine nose heavy Audis, it is a joy to drive. It's a much more surgical line. When I used to race Audi Quattros and S2s and things like that, that's a car you throw into the turn and you just stand on it.
Okay.
This is a much more surgical drive. It's probably not as easy to drive as modern Subaru stuff, but I just don't want to drive a Subaru because there's too many of them. I want to be different.
Right. That's one of the best things about racing a DSM. You get to be different.
The best, honest to God, the best part is anytime so every race begins with what's called a park expose, which is they pick a spot in the town, and all the rally cars are there, and we're all in our racing pajamas, and we sit around. But the townspeople can come up and interact and hang out, and it's just sort of the big pre-race party, if you will.
Okay.
And the two most fun things I have with that are, number one, when people come up and go, "Oh my God, I had one of those," and a conversation starts.
Mm-hmm.
But even more fun than that is when they have their little kids with them. And, the kids kind of could take it or leave it. And then I go, "Well, you want to get in it?" And then their eyes light up. And I open the door. I'm like, "Okay, this is like a jungle gym. You can climb on and step on anything." And, they get in the car, and I turn it on for them, and the dash lights up, and they like the way little kids and even some adults respond to, "Do you want to get in the thing?" It feels awesome. And it, put smiles on faces, and that's a hoot. And then, after we get done, people come up like, "Oh, I saw you at this turn, and that was awesome, and it sounds great," or, whatever it is, or, "Boy, you really screwed that up." But either way, that interaction with the public, the people who, okay, it's one thing. I can't go racing without my team,
Mm-hmm.
but we as a sport can't go racing at all if communities don't accept us,
That's fair.
welcome us.
Yeah.
Okay, we bring money into the regions, we do that, but they have to let us use their roads. And land access is so hard to do. The people who put on rallies produce miracles, near as I can tell. It's a hell of a thing to be allowed to do this. As crazy as it is, with all the effort and with all of the angst, the joy, the fear, the absolute code brown moments that occur, I achieve a mental reset when I return from a race, unlike anything else I do in my life, because there's basically 2 days where nothing exists except the road in front of your nose and the co-driver sound in your ear, and you have to make it all work, and nothing else can exist in that space. It's incredibly freeing. The flow state concentration, if that's a term you're familiar with.
I mean, the way you describe it, it's almost like a intimate or a romantic kind of relationship with this sport.
Yeah, there's probably an uncomfortable amount of truth to that. Certainly, when you have to pry open your wallet, there's an element that applies to the other side of that reference. But I do, kind of high pressure IT stuff for a living, and I am a fundamentally better person when I have those periods, when I'm able to race a couple of times a year, whether we finish or not, whether we blow the car up or not. Obviously, finishing, it's more fun, and putting on the podium is even more fun. But that camaraderie, the interaction, the challenge, the achievement, it all translates into, I would say at the end of the day, dropping your blood pressure. It's a thing that brings absolute satisfaction at an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think no matter the motorsport, we all kind of get that feeling in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I used to love going to track events, and the people and the camaraderie and the feel around the paddock. Rally is a little bit more dirt under your fingernails, or at least dirt on your jeans and everything, because you're rolling around in the dirt, quite literally.
Absolutely.
But there's this sense of we're all the same kind of crazy, and that works in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you get, people kind of angry with each other or frustrated, it passes really quickly. When we finished Lake Superior, which is the typical end of the national calendar for U.S. Rally, is the Lake Superior Pro Rally up in now it's in Marquette, Michigan. And it's the most gorgeous race, I think, in the U.S. because you're up there in October. It's color changing season. You're in these giant canopies of trees and all this riot of color, and you're going to have pretty much any year, you're going to have sunny days and rainy and snowy and everything in between right there on the shore of Lake Superior. It is just visually stunning.
Mm-hmm.
In this in 2025, the race ended, the finish line was downtown Marquette. So we did the race, and I think we did 4th or 5th in class. We did pretty good, but not great. And we got to the end of the race, but I was just happy and said, oh, okay, well, that's awesome. So we're downtown Marquette. We're drinking beer out there as the cars were all in what's called a parc fermé, where we have to leave them alone. We can't quite leave yet. It's part of the whole ceremony. That my crew chief comes up and says, hey, we're going to, go hit. We got a seat up or a table up in this bar over here. We're going to go over there and have dinner. And so that's great. So we, taking the team out for dinner. That's awesome. driver or co-driver and I are sitting there in our race pajamas in the middle of this bar. Didn't care. But my crew chief goes, "Hey, you're in second place for the championship." There was a number of expletives because I was probably 3 beers deep at this point. And I said, "No, that math doesn't work." So he and a couple of the other crew guys started rechecking each other's math. They're like, "No, you're in second." And that very quickly evolved into, well, there's one more race that we could do. We wasn't in our plan. And if the math was nobody could catch us, nobody could knock us off a second. But if we went and took second place or higher at the last race of the year, we could knock the guy in first off the peg. And so that turned into this whole kind of skunk works, register on the last possible second, keep everything secret. We don't talk about Fight Club kind of thing until our registration dropped. So we went at the show me race in November with one mission, which was start, finish, and take second place or better. And by God, we did it. So that whole things that didn't even seem possible at the beginning of the year when I very ungloriously stuffed the car into the trees 1.25 miles into the first stage.
Jeez.
Ended up in the championship and the trophy to have it. So you just don't know what the hell you're going to have. It's an amazing pot of potential and anguish and satisfaction and everything in between.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's a roller coaster of love and hate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There is traditionally a when we are driving homes from races, I would always ask the guys in the car, I'm like, okay, well, what's the next race car going to be? What are we building next? Just as a way to pass time. And I think I'm not for the amount of money that I've invested in the car and the time and everything. I don't know that I want to race something else. I mean, yeah, it'd be neat to magically appear in a $250,000 car, but I don't think it'd make me any faster.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being one of the crazy guys running these old cars, and just making them do what they were supposed to do. It's a cool thing. So much so that I actually now have a 93 Plymouth Laser RS turbo that will become the recce car. I'm actually waiting for the gravel suspension to show up for it.
Okay.
Cool. I bought the thing as a pile of parts because we needed the prop shaft for a race, but the whole there's no rust on it. I had to put all the engine together and do a bunch of stuff, but I'm not sure what edition they call it in DSM speak. Maybe it's the dark green with the sunroof and the gold wheels and the gold lettering. Anyway, so now I own 2 of these bloody things.
I feel like the lasers are so unique. It's almost like a completely separate kind of thing where there's RS non-turbo, there's RS turbo, it's RS all-wheel drive, RS front-wheel drive. It doesn't keep up with the Mitsubishi and the Eagle versions, but in a similar way that almost makes them cooler, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I think I think the Eagles looked better, and the Eagles and the GSXs, but you take what you got, and for what I got into this thing, it's shaping up to be a reliable car. Now I have learned more about finding and chasing oil leaks, and UV dye and a UV light on this particular engine, and the joys of that, that whole oiling system
Than you ever cared.
But it's been good knowledge to have along the way.
That's fair.
and now we're going to have an identical car and an identical chassis with suspension and skid plate and nearly the same kind of engine and gearing as the race car when we go on recce, because you're not allowed to use your race car when you're making your recce notes. That's one of the rules. It has to be a race car, or it can't look like a race car, basically. It can't have all the stickers in the cage and all the other stuff.
Okay.
So what I found was, as I got faster, when we were making our notes and my eyes were up in the air where you sit in a 1-ton 4x4 turbo diesel truck, the road looks a hell of a lot different when you're in a DSM with a lowered floor pan.
I'm sure.
So it's all part of our growing thing. But yeah, I now have 2 of these bloody things.
Wow.
And I'm spending right now, as a matter of fact, spending time on, next thing is to delete the fast idle air valve because I think it's gotten lazy and old.
Well, so Rob, you talked about lowering the seat pan and moving it in 6 inches to accommodate the halo seats, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's just a ton of things that are unique challenges that a DSM has to go through in order to be rally prepped, in order to be able to take on the bumps and bruises of a rally course. So, besides the ones that you already talked about, is there something else that maybe sticks out in your mind as a challenge specific to this chassis?
Absolutely, number one is, it is interior cabin space with all of the required roll cage bars. By a mile, that is the most difficult thing to deal with. As a matter of fact, we are down right now because we have to add yet even more bars in order to satisfy a rules update.
Oh, wow.
That really caused some consternation because it's making the opening for me to get in and out of even tighter. But that said, can you take a stock DSM and go out to a rallycross course? Yeah, you absolutely could. What would I do if I were doing that? The bare minimum would be I'd put a skid plate on it, but the rest of it, you can certainly start there. To go from that to stage rally, there's a cage. That's a big thing, and you want to tie the cage all the way into the suspension components
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible, just for all the stiffness, and then add all the right safety gear and the fire gear and all this sort of stuff. On the suspension side of the coin, that's where things get a little bit interesting with DSMs because I'm running the K Sport gravels. K Sport makes 3 levels of gravel, the ones that we can get in the US, and then they make 2 higher levels that they won't commit to selling me yet.
Huh.
So the ones we can get in the US are they're very adequate for US rally as long as you don't jump the car. But if you start wanting to jump the car like the top 10 guys do that are on very exotic suspension, you're going to blow the shocks out. Bend shafts and things like that. But I think the weakest weakest part of the suspension knuckle control arm arrangement is actually the front knuckle where it attaches to the shocks. That little thin cast piece there.
Mm.
Just about everybody that's rallied at DSM has broken that, including us. So one of my crew guys, Eli, he figured out the right metals and rods and welding and temperatures and stuff in order to up armor those knuckles. So we have, steel plate reinforcements on either side that were done the right way to weld onto those cast sections that are weak to shore those up and keep them from breaking. And then we did a couple of sets of those. What we've found is actually we're kind of going back to using some stock OE upper strut mounts as compared to the aluminum ones that come with the case boards, because we were bending those, and the stock steel ones, it turns out they're more robust.
Huh.
Um, the how you mount your skid plate and how much structure you have for that kind of matters a lot. Where we get the most wear and tear on the car is from the B pillar back, because of the gravel spray from the front wheels. So if you look at our car, if you look at a picture of our car, my car, I don't know why I say our car. If you look at a picture of 597, and we get this question a lot actually, is why are there mud flaps under the middle of the car, about halfway back?
Uh-huh.
And those are to deal with the dirt, rocks, mud, and crap thrown by the front wheels when the wheels are at angles. And I always thought it was a bit of hokum, snake oil, if you will. But one year I ripped one of them off, and somewhere on stage, and the side that didn't have it, the wheel was absolutely packed full of dirt, rocks, and crap. My guys had to chisel out of service. The other side that did have it was clean. So
Wow.
the amount of sandblasting between the dirt, the rocks, the stuff that comes off the front wheels is hell on the back end of the car. The control arms, the body panels that are there towards the bottom of the car. I'm suddenly forgetting what the name of that body panel is. All of that stuff in that region, you spend a lot of time fine tuning bash plates, skid plates, and kind of gravel wear control stuff. This particular car on the brakes, we've had a number of iterations on, but it's all AP Racing 4-pot calipers from the 90s. It's not even a caliper they make anymore, let alone have parts for. That's getting a little hard to support because all rally tires are 15-inch.
Oh.
So your brake choices and your wheel choices are pretty limited.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a 16-inch gravel tire that's anywhere that has the durability of a true rally tire. I run Pirelli's, the K6 compound, or it's typically what I use. And I think we run a 195 6515 on Reese, Millen Motorsports wheels that have been around forever. I finally broke my first one at the last race we did because I hung a wheel off a ditch and kept my foot in it like a brave man, but that destroyed the inner barrel of the wheel, broke it clean in half. So you do have some wear and tear. But there's a lot of stuff on the car that has been seam welded through the years, but I it's had so many people in it through so many races that I don't know what the original one was. Since I didn't build it, I can't tell you. When I pick up that old book from Germany, it has, it has detailed imagery of, okay, here's what Audi Sport did when they took a stock chassis and then they did this to it and that to it and that to it, or here's what Peugeot did, or
Right.
you name it. But that kind of work all goes into stage rally. I mean, at the end of the day, stage rally is about survival more so than maximum power. The I think the Mitsubishi, the DSM's weak spot is still the transmission, but the DSM community is so, and guys like Tim Zimmer know exactly what the hell you're going to break on these things, so they've done a tremendous job in servicing it to make it survivable, to make it last.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't go into a race thinking I have to baby my transmission. But I also don't go in it and think I'm going to speed shift everything. I have to drive with a certain amount of mechanical sympathy. And some of that's through lessons learned. I think, one of the questions you had sent earlier was, geez, what's some lessons you've learned through the years? And the hardest one, the most expensive one, was We had just done the first main refit of the engine and rebuild and the replatform on the Haltech and all that stuff. So that was let's call that a $15,000 change.
Ooh.
And we did a bunch of things, but it was a big refit. And we were at the first race. This was my run-in with Betsy. We were at 100 Acre Woods, and we were on the last stage of the race, 3 miles from the end, and I started. We always had a problem where we were running pretty hot. Our oil temps were pretty high, and our coolant temps were pretty high, but we were still within the margin of error. And I started seeing steam coming out the hood vent. I'm like, okay, we got a busted hose or we got something, but we were so close to the end. I'm like, we can make it, because I kept watching the oil temp, and it was sitting at I think 135 C or something, which is really hot. But I thought, okay, well, we've still got some leeway. So I kept my foot in it, kept us going. Water temps kind of shot up. We got to the end of the finish line. Engine was still running. Handed in our time card, got clear of the control, because you can't open your hood while you're in the control. Jumped out, started to try to dump water in this thing. And the engine was so hot that the water was boiling the second it was put into the reservoir.
Oh my God.
And it would just turn to vapor. So we cooked the engine, tried to get it back, and then it just gave up the ghost. It was done. And all of that was caused by one probably $3 section of hose that split.
Oh my!
And at the end of the day, you go, well, why did that occur? And it was just a hose that we never changed. I have no idea how old that hose was, because it was there when I bought the car, and it never had a problem, so I never thought about it. So the hardest lesson learned was, okay, at this level, you have to do things like replace every hose every year, at least. Why? Because you just don't know. Change the belts, throw a new timing belt on it, because you just don't, even if you know how old it is, that $50 timing belt is a lot cheaper than a $15,000 engine.
Yep.
And, those kinds of consumables, they add to the cost. It's a tougher part of the equation to get your brain wrapped around. I used to be kind of cheap with my race tires. I would buy other people's, 1 race, 2 race used tires. And this, in 2025, I decided, okay, I'm going to run the new Pirellis, and I'll only run them for 2 races and then replace them. And that added so much speed for us that, it's the little things. It really is turning into the little things now that are having big, big improvements in results. Like our next change is to all the switch gear for the lights and the race mode and all that stuff. Those are all still mechanical switches, and we're changing to a CAN bus keypad. And then I'm going to spend all my time on air inlet ducting in order to get the right airflow over the heat exchangers to maximize their efficiency, because we still run hot on long stages. And I want to solve that problem. We run hot even with a 40-row oil cooler.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty exotic radiator, some sort of brass bronze, extra thick, blah, blah, blah thing, some unobtainium Group A part from back in the day, of which I have 2, one and a spare, a used spare, but it's a spare nonetheless. And then, the heat exchangers, etc. We got a really weird problem right now with power steering that we have not solved. And you'd think this would be easy, but 2 pumps and 2 racks later, the whole power steering system loses all its boost once the engine and fluid is up to temp.
No kidding.
And
wow.
I literally just put a new reman rack on it, and we still got the same problem. It originally presented as it would vomit all the fluid out the reservoir but we, checked all the lines, made sure they're all open, blah, blah, blah. So this weekend, I'm actually going to drive the Laser back over to Madison because the Laser's power steering system is totally stock, working fine. And I'm going to swap pumps and see if the problem moves with the pump or goes, or changes or whatever. Because the last thing it could be would be the lines that are somehow perfectly fine when you take them off and you static check them, but something is going on. But it's stuff like this that you can get completely stymied on and lose hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, and be taken out of an event for something very small, like you said, a 3-inch piece of hose.
Oh yeah, you're in other cars I've raced. The loss of an alternator can end your race. The having the spare, understanding what you're likely to break, and then having the spares and having the crew that knows where the hell the spare is and can prioritize what thing do they have to fix first in order to get you back out on the road in time. That's where it comes all the way back around to crew and that total sense of trust. And we still learn lessons that at the last race we did, at the last service, we left and got on the road, and the car doesn't feel right. We got 3 more stages to drive, and I'm kind of oscillating it back and forth in the lane. I'm like, God, it just feels loose as hell. Like I told the co-driver, I said, hey, Kevin, while we still have cell service, because we're off in the boonies, you don't have it for very long. I said, call the crew guys and ask them if they torque the wheels, because I don't remember seeing them do that. Well, sure as shit, they said, no, none of us remember doing that. So we had to pull over and grab the Ugga-Dugga gun that we carry with us for spare changes, and every lug nut was loose.
Oh my gosh.
On every wheel. So got those torqued down, went race, finished race, everything was great. And then that night over dinner, we sat down and said, okay, well, what's our new procedure going to be? So we haven't tested this out yet, but we think our new procedure is that when I come in for service, before I'm allowed out of the car, somebody has to set the torque wrench on the roof.
That's smart.
And I can't leave service until that torque wrench is off the roof. Now, that doesn't mean it's been on the bolts, but it makes somebody have it in their hand at least.
Right. It makes you think about it.
Yep. So it's all those lessons learned along the way. The guys know which bolts to recheck torque on. The rear differential, I guess, coming back to the question you asked, what are the things you have to do at DSM and rally? There's a fair amount of additional reinforcing and strengthening of the rear differential carrier.
Okay.
That stuff tends to crack back there. Solvable with, you weld plates of steel onto various things and you solve it. But that's a place you got to pay attention to. And then we haven't diagnosed it yet, but when we were tearing it apart to work on the steering rack, we drained the transfer case, and I always run at Tim's suggestion, I always run the pink red line super magic fluid. I forget what the hell it's called, but this time it came out blacker than black, and I don't know what's going on yet. So we may have an issue where that's got to be rebuilt before next race. So we'll have to see. You have to commit to the service intervals, I guess, is probably the end of that very long, very meandery story.
Yeah, and I think that goes for a lot of different motorsports, right? Like if we're neglecting the maintenance, we're for sure going to have problems.
Yeah. If you're going after the next 5 horsepower and skipping on that one thing of maintenance, boy, unless your data logs say you're at 100% throttle 100% of the time, yeah, screw the 5 horsepower, fix the thing.
Right. Yep.
It's pretty interesting. We're as much fun as it would be to have, be allowed in the rules to have more boost. I don't need it. I need to use what I got more.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, when you're on those fire roads and the trees are going by at 100 plus mile an hour and it all feels really narrow, I'm not really sure I want to go 120 or 130 like the really, really big boys do. I'm okay.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by Club Spec Custom Designs. They pride themselves on providing the highest level of customer service and satisfaction with their innovative designs and quality. They guarantee that you will be amazed with the results that will be produced. They are providing quality products for your Mitsubishi Lancer Rally Art, Mitsubishi Evolution 10, or Mitsubishi Outlander Sport. Check out all their products at clubspecchicago.com. But I think that leads perfect into my next question. You know, DSMs have a reputation for both their amazing performance and reliability struggles. I think that a lot of the reliability struggles comes from, you know, people pushing too much boost on a small turbo like a 16G. I think that you know, with the 2-bar limit and the 16G with the restrictor, that kind of reins in some of that and helps really keep the car alive and keep the engine happy, where, you know, you're not just beating on it over and over again and probably going through multiple engines a season.
Yeah, as much as I am not a fan at all of turbo inlet restrictors, I would, with the technology we have, I would much rather see them control our maximum speed potential through other methods, you know, a satellite tracking your speed or whatever.
Okay.
But while we live in a world that have these inlet restrictors as a way to limit total engine power, it does save the engine kind of at the expense of the turbo. The first and the one and only turbo I've ever blown up in my life was actually the small 16G that used to be on this car, that I snapped the shaft coming out of a virtual chicane because it was such an extreme slowing of the engine to ramp up to full boost that it just overspun the turbo because of what a restrictor does.
Mm-hmm.
And for your audience, a turbo inlet restrictor, yeah, it controls air, but what it actually makes the cold side of your turbo do is basically, if you're at sea level and you're breathing through an inlet restrictor, your turbo is functioning like it's already starting at 14,000 feet of elevation. So it's way into its surge line characteristics, and you know, you have to be really careful about how you size things and what you do in order to keep it from, well, blowing up. So I'm not a fan of restrictors in that regard, but we've learned to live with it.
Mm-hmm. I've seen the restrictors by, you know, rally drivers on TV kind of describe it as breathing through a straw all the time. And
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Try running a marathon breathing through a coffee straw.
Yeah,
it's you know, it's sort of funny because I have these occasional dreams where I'm like, well, what if the restrictor just fell out and we went and raced? Like, I'm almost afraid to take the restrictor off the car just to see what it would even feel like, because then I think I would be missing that power all the time. I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
So I tempt fate. One of the other cars in my fleet at home is an Audi S2 with all RS2 running gear, which is all to say it's, you know, 26-pound boost type car, and it goes like the clappers, but it's a different drive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the nice thing about those inlet restrictors is they actually increase the air velocity on your cold side, so your spool up tends to be quicker, but you hit this flat line at the top that you wouldn't otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I could talk a lot about that. I'm not sure you want to get that bored.
Well, Rob, as we know, you know, rally racing is unpredictable. It night, day, rain, dry, snow, everything. And you talked about having some squirrely, you know, moments in the past. What has been the craziest moment you've had behind the wheel of this DSM?
Well, you know, I've been trying to think about that, because I think probably there are so many individual moments. It's not the easiest question to answer. I think the most out of control I've ever felt in the car was the first year I went back to Lake Superior, where they, for a couple of years, they had us racing up and down a ski hill.
Oh, wow.
And, it's not like you're out west in Colorado, but a ski hill, with chair lifts and things like that, is a lot steeper than you might really realize when you're in a car. And so, we raced up this thing, and it was rough and beat to shit, and very, very hard on the car and the driver and the co-driver. We got to the top, and now it's time to race down. And that feeling, because I downhill ski all my life. I know what this feels like, but doing it in 2,700 pounds at car, that's a whole different ball game. And in that particular race, there was a turn kind of halfway down the slope. Thank God we had made the note that said not to cut, where cut means drive over the inside of the turn. Where for some reason, if you cut that turn, you ended up in this roughly car-sized pothole that stopped you dead. We happened to go by it, not purely by skill. I think it was half luck, as I was damn near out of full control. But other cars ended up in that hole and, stuck, dead, stopped. Race is over. I think that's probably the most out of control in the moment, but kind of still living right there on the ragged edge, with just enough luck to survive, past probably what was some inherent stupidity on my part. The previously in other cars that I co-drove in, there have been some wilder stories of things on fire and crashes and stuff like that.
Wow.
The one crash I've had with this DSM, which was the season opener of the 2025 season, it's a race called the Magi Trail, where I crashed in the first mile and a quarter. I distinctly recall coming into that turn, and so that's a race in Minnesota. You're either going to hit ice or wet mud or whatever. It's kind of that time of year. And I got us, it was the first race of the year. I was good to go. I was hot to trot. We went in it hard, and I got the car slightly on the wrong side of the crown of the road, and that started to yaw the car to the passenger side. You swing the tail out to the right. And I have a very distinct memory of the choice I had to make right in that moment, which was, I know the answer is to put my foot in it, give it the full beans, and drive it out. But I could see that if that didn't quite work, we were going to go broadside into an oak that was 5 foot in diameter.
Oh, gosh.
Or I could climb on the binders and hope we didn't end up in the little trees, which is exactly where we ended up, by the way. So I climbed on the binders, and poof, off we went, right into little trees, broke the right front knuckle, broke the right front axle, tore the rear bumper off, broke the rear lights, all that sort of stuff. I mean, we were down hard. And it was really embarrassing, because that particular race runs that one road 4 times, and Sweep wouldn't tow us out until the race was over. So we got to watch everybody race past us.
Oh my God.
Back and forth 4 freaking times while we sat there on the side of the road looking stupid. But that was a moment of pretty serious humility. I learned I went in too hot. I know I made the right call. It limited the amount of damage we had, and we could race again. Whereas if I made the other call, it was 50-50. We were going to look like heroes, or I could have really, really hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to be all downer, but those are I think probably if I would have been in my 20s, I would have made the put your foot in it call, and risk accepted. But I look at things a little bit differently as I've gotten grayer.
Sure. Well, you kind of talked about it there, but how do you go about the middle of a race balancing speed with car preservation during a stage rally event? Because I mean, obviously you want to hit the loud pedal and keep it pedal to the metal the whole time, but you don't also want to tear the car up or broadside a 5-foot oak tree.
Right. Well, that is the art of rally right there. It's as fast as you can possibly go, but if you don't finish the race, none of it matters. Yeah, you might have a cool video of some stuff, but you got to live with, but I didn't finish. And, rally is endurance. No different than, say, a 24-hour race. It doesn't do you any good to show up for the first hour of Sebring and crash out.
Right.
Or blow up. So, learning those lessons, the joy of rally is coming through those hard lessons and then being able to do it long enough to begin to make choices. So you're asking the question, how do I go about my decision making on stage for, go faster or pull back? The easiest answers are when the conditions are so rough that what you're feeling in your body hurts. It's time to go a little bit slower because you're absolutely just beating the hell out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really sustainable. The next part comes for me and the people that co-drive with me. When, I think I said it earlier, when the speeds get so high, I will pull my foot out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do that on a road course, but where do your speeds get super high in rally? It's when we don't get these very often, but you'll occasionally get stages that have really twisty stuff and then sections of long straights that are like connecting roads between forest road sections. So they're, between gas wells and things. They're wide, they're flat, they're smooth, they're gravel. You can go like hell on them. But you're out there in the woods. Deer can jump out. Things can happen. Stuff goes wrong. Trees fall. Just what I've found is there's sort of this limit in my brain. At about 110, I don't really need to go a hell of a lot faster on stage at the level of prep we're at. So that's kind of the second choice. And then the third choice for me, and it happens on every long stage I do, is once I start getting the flashing warning lights of we're over temp, I have to decide, do I want to risk accept, still push hard to the point where with the modern engine management, we now have safeties that kick in and eventually take the decision away from me to save the engine.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very hard lesson to learn to turn those on. So now, that once things are really hot, managing where can I push, essentially gearing down, taking us lower into the RPM band to try and dissipate more heat, but still keep going. That's probably the most common situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then occasionally your co-driver, just by the nature of the job, you get lost. Your notes get out of sequence and they don't know where they are. So you have to go back to driving what you can see until they figure out where they're at, and then the flow of information can be trusted again. Those are sort of the four, at least at the skill level I'm at, those are the four kind of things that happen.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, never having done rally myself, but I'm a big fan. I'll wake up early to keep up with Dakar and stuff like that. I don't think people realize how much of a war of attrition stage rally racing really is.
It's that's where things get really interesting. You go, well, how many people started the race? 60, 70 cars. Well, how many finished? 20, 23.
Mm-hmm.
So that first the one time I've run the Southern Ohio Forest Rally in the class I was in, which was open all-wheel drive. I told you I'd come back to this story. So Mike and I do this race. We weren't particularly fast. I boiled the brakes all the time. So, there was a whole lot of the race where we had absolutely no brake pedal, and we were having to go slow as a result. So we get to the end of this race, and we're in the back of the field. And I don't think much of it because it was our second race, and I didn't have any expectations. And we were in this Parc Fermé, horde of people and all the cars where they keep us until they let us all go. And we were right next to the Team Honda guys. And kind of just shooting the breeze and congratulating ourselves on having finished the thing. And I was chatting with some locals, and they had handed me a beer. That was really nice of them. And then one of the Honda guys goes, they were doing the announcements of the podium stuff and who won what or whatever. And he goes, dude, they called your name. I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, yeah, they did. I'm like, dude, you are this is bullshit. There's no way. And so they egged me on, and finally I got so frustrated. I'm like, look, I'm going to go up there, and you guys are going to have your laugh. So I go wandering up to the podium. People were starting to dissipate, and I said, the guy with the microphone was like, hey, did you call Rob Dupree? He goes, yeah. I'm like, oh, well, I'm him. He goes, hold on, everybody, he's here. And so Mike comes over, and he goes, you guys took first place in your class. And I didn't think at all, but certainly within shot of the microphone, I said, get the fuck out of here. He goes, no, you're the only ones that finished. So the amount of attrition, you can win your class sometimes just by being the only person that finishes. Because it is that hard. It's that hard to survive it and stay in it and stay committed and make it to the end. And, that's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's a definitely a scary thing when you're running that and suddenly your brake pedal goes to the floor.
Oh,
that's pretty unfun.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I've heard people, talk about their, circuit track racing and doing time attack stuff like that, and they lose a brake pedal, but at least there you have some type of runoff or some type of maybe nice soft tire wall you can run into. Whereas, if you're stage rally racing, that's almost never the case.
Right. Yeah. Your choice is you throw the car sideways. Funny little story, quick one. So I bought the car, broke the control arm, and then I was invited to join a track day at Road America, which is just up the road from where I live. And I'm like, oh, well, perfect. I can at least go drive the car at speed. This is really my first outing with this thing. And it had been 20 years since I'd driven Road America, but that course doesn't change much. So I get out there in my little rally car and with some used rally gravel tires on it. And I go off to go drive Road America during a track session. And if you're familiar with Road America, it's got a couple of big straights. But the middle straight ends in a hard 90-degree left turn that goes up a hill, but the outside of the turn is a wall. It's a tire wall. And so I'm going to do a couple laps. Everything's fine. And I'm on this next lap, and I, into the top of fifth gear, foot to the floor. Everything's fine. I start seeing the brake markers, and I put my foot on the brake pedal, and it goes right to the floor.
Oh.
And I'm watching this wall come at me, and I'm like, uh-oh. And so just did what you can do in rally, and I threw the car sideways and shifted down and stood on the gas and went Scandinavian flicking through that turn at Road America up the hill. And that was immediately black flagged, by the way. But yeah, that's I think probably for me, our consistent challenges are the brakes always get hot on this car. I haven't solved that. So at least once a race, at least for part of a stage, I'm using the hydraulic rear handbrake and just the rear brakes to try and slow the car down.
Oh,
We just cannot get enough airflow over. We can't get enough airflow to the inside bell of the rotors, and then I'm always overheating on long stages, or getting to the running really hot, points of view. The engine oil analysis we do after every race just to make sure we're not starting to chew up bearings. But those are the two problems that are still consistent with this car since day one, and we're still chasing them.
okay.
So if any of your listeners have awesome ideas on how to fix either of those problems, geez, I'd love to hear that.
You're all ears.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you can hear the dog. I apologize. He's decided there's deer.
That's okay. Rob, you've gotten to drive this car, like you said, on Road America, and gravel surfaces, on the snow and the dirt, everything. What do you think has been your favorite, and what do you think the car likes the most as far as terrain?
So my particular favorite surface is snow and ice. And the car's really well suited to that. But now a very close second is becoming the stage roads down in Missouri, which are very gorgeous, tight, twisty, but smooth enough gravel roads with a reasonably consistent surface, kind of grip level of the surface. They're, the roads kind of down in Salem and Potosi in that area. They are stunningly good, and the car, I think, as my skill improves, I'll be able to drive as well on that kind of surface as I can on the snow and ice, which is really one of my strengths.
Okay. Well, Rob, you talked about it a lot already, but I want to emphasize how important the relationship is with the driver and the co-driver, and more so what makes a good pair, that gets through these races consistently without having a lot of incidents.
It's an interesting thing. So before I became a driver, I was a co-driver in my journey of coming up in rally, and now co-driving back then was a far simpler affair than it is today. So the between Betsy and Kevin, who are the most capable people I've ever ridden with, they both, their professionalism to their task, to their craft of being able to tolerate being driven around for multiple days and make all these notes and all this stuff, and make suggestions and offer insight and keep everything on track. That's sort of table stakes. Where they excel is the extra diligence. So, what do I mean by that? Well, both Kevin and Betsy, if it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm going to bed and we've got a 6 a.m. wake up the next morning or a 5 a.m. wake up, they're still sitting there on their laptop or reviewing the recce video from the day and comparing it to their notes and trying to make sure everything lines up and looking for things that we didn't observe in the time. So really, by the time we've gotten to start the race, they've seen it once where we made the notes, rehearsed it at least once, sometimes twice by themselves, and then they're doing it for real, all in the span of about 24 hours. It is a level of commitment and focus that is astonishing. And because they have that focus, it allows me, as the dumb driver guy, that I can turn my brain off and go to sleep and actually be rested. That's just getting to the start line. The other thing that is vitally important is that the co-driver is absolutely in the command and control of the pace of the race. So, yeah, I got the gas pedal, but they control where we go, when we go, how we go. And then once we get into service, they control the timer. They tell the service crew, here, here's what it needs in terms of Rob thinks the car was feeling like this, but Kevin and Betsy both act as the interface so that when I pull into service and the crew lets me get out of the car, my job is I have to go sit down somewhere and stay the hell out of their way and maybe, eat a power bar or a sandwich or something and let everybody else do their role. And it is the co-driver who is absolutely the command and control in all those times. They tell us when we got to move, when we got to do anything. They without the co-driver, none of this works. I've been exceptionally lucky to ride with both of them.
Rob, you talked about in the past you had done some circuit racing and kind of tried your hand, or at least got a taste of some different forms of motorsport. In your opinion, how do you think that the rally community is compared to other forms of motorsport that you've been able to experience?
I think in our heart, all racing communities are kind of the same. We're in love with the machinery. We're in love with competition with each other. We probably all grumble about the rules and find our way to the edge of those rules. If what are the two extremes that I've experienced? Well, one extreme would be the olden budget days of SCCA Club Rally, which was far more kind of run what you brung. The production classes were very few changes were allowed other than put the roll cage in. To being in the Ferrari paddock at Las Vegas for Formula One a couple of years back. The people doing the sport have the same kind of feel and behavior and focus. Obviously, the money around the two sports and the population and the fan base, that's vastly different worlds. But there's, to the credit of rally fans, the fact that there are people who are willing to stand out in the woods in the middle of the bloody night waiting for some cars to go whizzing by once or twice,
right, that they only get to see
is astonishing to me.
Yeah.
If you ever are looking around for some interesting videos about US Rally, look up the Gasoline Alley stage for Snowdrift.
Okay.
The Gasoline Alley was typically the last stage that all the cars would run. And while they did not run Gasoline Alley this year because the crowds had gotten too big and too unruly, the tradition was becoming these people would be out in the woods all bloody day in the winter.
Jeez.
Pretty much drinking and eating and having a good time. And then the stage was always run at night. And they had to be out there all bloody day. And then they would make these ginormous bonfires. And then as we drove through with the cars, they would make the bonfires sort of explode, throw gasoline bombs or whatever they put on them.
Wow.
So from the car, it feels like you're driving through like a movie special effects with these explosions going off. And everybody was having a grand old time and that sort of stuff. The last time I drove Gasoline Alley, we were getting ready to start the stage, and when you're in the control, if they have any last minute notes, they'll tell you what it is and make you sign this thing. So they said, hey, mile marker such and such, flamethrowers and laser beams, sign here. It sure is shit. There was a dude. It was, if you recall the last Mad Max movie, the guy with the guitar, the flamethrowing guitar on the front of the truck, spraying the sky with this big. There was some dude in the woods with a flamethrower doing the same damn thing.
Wow.
And somebody else slightly down the road that had these lasers, and so like it's just surreal that people will do this, and the spectators kind of have to race the racers if you want to see them, more than one stage. So they'll see the cars they want to see, and then they have to run back out of the woods and get to their car and drive to the next one. And it involves so many locals and so many people, and they don't have to pay any money because they're standing out there in the middle of the bloody woods. So I think rally is accessible because of its scale and because of its location.
Yeah.
And has a less exclusionary vibe, like, can you afford the tickets to go to the track, and can you pay Formula One $250 for a plate of nachos? So there's, I wouldn't put one over the other. F1, look, F1 as a show, or the V8 supercars or whatever, those, I'm in awe of what those drivers can do. I would love someday to strap into an Aussie V8 supercar just to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd even like to experience a full bore NASCAR car on an oval track. Now, the oval track's not really my thing, but I know there's immense skill involved. It can't be easy. But I like the challenge of what rally does, and while it is a great way to light $100 bills on fire, it is not an insanely expensive sport to do.
Yeah, I really like that aspect of it, where it's kind of the fans. There's it's not like there's bleacher setup. They can kind of be where they want to be and get their favorite vantage point of the race.
Absolutely. There's my favorite part of any race is when we get to a spectator corner. Any race when we're out on stage is when we get to a corner that has spectators. And I kind of always play this little game in my head, which inevitably that means somebody's got their little GoPros or something really close to the road. And my job is to get the car as wild as I can and the tire as close as I can to that GoPro without touching it. That's sort of the little game I play. And there have been a few pictures through the years where I've just nailed it. And you can see the people are having an absolute ball in the background. The car looks great. Everything looks fantastic. It just feels awesome. Mm-hmm. But everybody's safe, but you're close enough that, sometimes it doesn't entirely feel safe. We've had a few where I thought, God, if I got that a little bit wrong, you're going to end up in a pile of people. But ARA and NASCAR are both very, very good about making that an exceptionally rare thing. Mm-hmm. It probably looks different from in the car than it looks from out the car. But one of my favorite pictures of is us at Snowdrift, kind of pulling one of those maneuvers on a tight spectator corner, and you can see through the spray of the snow and the ice, there's this guy in the background who's just absolutely, totally into it in the moment. And that just feels good.
And he was probably having the time of his life.
Yeah, or a whole lot of good beer. One of the two, or both.
Preferably both.
Yeah, but I like that it's accessible. If I could wave a magic wand, I would, want the U.S. rail system or the U.S. trucking system to figure out how to make it economical for us to get our racing gear from the, to the races at the West Coast and on the far East Coast, because it is just so long to tow across this country. Or same thing to go to the races up in Canada. Mm-hmm. I'd like to do a number of those. I've done them as co-drivers, but I'd like to do them as drivers now.
Yeah. Well, Rob, you mentioned some names early on in this podcast. Who has been some of your biggest inspirations when it comes to rally racing?
Yeah, by several orders of magnitude, the guy that got me into it, all of this motorsport stuff, guy named Scott Justison, you know, friend for now 30 years, you know, from a very auspicious beginning to you know, still a motorsports mentor, still a just a mentor in general, great friend. And then the first John Reck, who I first co-drove for, allowing me to, you know, this young buck to even be in that car that, you know, it was an Audi factory works car that raced San Remo. I mean, it was the real deal. God, I wish I would have bought that car. You know, since then there's there've been a number of very good friends in motorsports lands, but as of recent, related to this DSM, you know, between Mike Funk originally being willing to be my co-driver, to then Betsy Wen and Kevin Dobrowolski, who are my two go-to co-drivers, and then Colin and Eli, and Kyle and the other guys on the crew. Like they're my motorsports family. They are people who will drop what they're doing and participate in a way that allows me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And they trust that they're going to have a decent hotel room and really good food and whatever the heck they want to drink, and they give me their time and I take care of them and they take care of me, and it's a wonderful thing. And then not for nothing, my partner Ty, who said, "Hey, before you get too old and fat, maybe you should go race." It's an awesome thing to have a partner who can see that is maybe a thing you need.
Sure.
And even though he really could care less about rally or racing or cars, he knows it's a part of me, and so he supports and encourages and says, "Well, heck yeah, you better go do that." That's all important stuff.
Very.
And then I guess while you wouldn't know it, the origin of this entire story. I had started my career. I was working. I had bought my first car myself. It was a Dodge Dakota truck or something. And it was my father who said, "Hey, you should save money. You should sell that and let me give you my Audi 5000 and you'll save money." And it was that car, that action in that car, which caused me to have to meet Scott in order to start to figure out how to maintain this bloody Audi on the salary I had, because it was way too expensive to support. So had my dad not said, "You could maybe save money with this thing," I never would have gotten into motorsports and thus spent ginormous sums of money relative to my income through the decades. Good intention, very much the wrong result.
It's the first domino that went down.
Absolutely. That's a very good way to put it. It was the very first domino that fell. Every once my father's now 90, and every once in a while I give him crap and say, "How much money do you figure I've saved through the years?" If he only knew,
Oh yeah.
Now we become between my partner and I, we're the two drivers in a household of 7 cars. I just like them. Cars are neat. I never really spend a ton of money on them, but I spend a lot of time working on them. But they're just a passion.
Yeah. They each have a soul.
Yeah, that they do.
Well, Rob, you talked about it earlier, how the fields nowadays are mostly full of like Subarus and Audis and other things like that. How does it feel to compete against cars that are newer and maybe built for more, standard rally racing. It's a lot easier to convert them to handle the stage rallies.
Oh, I mean, look, there's like with anything, there will always be people who can outspend you.
Oh yeah.
I think it kind of doesn't matter where you are in the economic strata. Um, so a long, long time ago, I had to get okay with the kind of run what you brung mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I do try to take from watching what those cars do and are like, and the people that drive them, and the technologies they're deploying. You try to learn, you try to emulate, but the top 10 cars in the field. Okay, let's leave Team Subaru out of it, the Vermont sports car guys, because they're, unless they crash, they almost always finish. But you get people running $500,000 cars or $250,000 cars, and they break at just as many races as the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
That money doesn't solve all of it, but it does probably make their driving a lot easier. Someday I would love to get into one of the modern FIA kind of Euro cars.
Sure.
It was interesting. There's a guy that races Pete Farrow, and he, I think it was Pete anyway. There's a gentleman that races, and he leases one of the Euro class cars that comes over on a passport. It's a real high end M Sport built car. And he spends a pretty penny to do that. And his view was, well, rather than owning the thing, he'll do 2 races a year in this really nice car. It's a different approach. I do think the modern stuff, especially in the exotic suspension and drive lines, do they have an advantage? Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I would love to step up to an Intrax, to Oleans, even to the top end of the K Sport suspension line, because I could confidently send the DSM over crests and jumps rather than having to brake at the crest to try to keep the wheels on the ground, and that would be more spectacular. But I think at the end of the day, and I go all the way back to my track days where I wanted more and more and more power, and Scott and other mentors around him said, actually, what you need to do is figure out how to drive a mid 80s diesel Rabbit quickly around a racetrack, and then add horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know how to drive, and you're covering up your mistakes with power. So, with the different rally cars I've had through the different years, I think I'm in the right machine at the right time, and we've uplifted it enough for it to still be competitive. I mean, clearly we achieved a championship already with it, but if I had the budget to run a national series, I think the car would still be competitive. I may not be top 10, but I might be top 15 or 20. And that's, for a car that's that old with that many races and that much history, that's a hell of a thing.
Yeah. What you were talking about is people who could outspend you. I don't know how many people really know this, but the drummer, I believe, from Def Leppard, Vivian Campbell, he races a FIA prepped Mitsubishi Mirage, and I got to see him in action in the Tennessee. I believe it's called the Overmount Rally. Correct me if I'm
Yes,
wrong.
Overmount. Yep.
And he didn't finish great, so it kind of shows you that maybe money can't buy the skill, but the car for sure was, you could tell, just an absolute pristine machine that he must have spent a lot of money on.
Well, yeah, there's I know the car you're talking about, and I don't think I've met him personally yet, but um, there is I don't know the right term. There's this functional elegance of very highly prepped rally cars that to me crosses the line into kind of like a sculptural beauty.
Mhm.
It's all very functional, but when you see some of the carbon work and the thought and care into where they're putting the coolers and how everything is plumbed and wired and situated and the changes from a stock car, they're just gorgeous, outside skin and under the skin.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Uncle Iro, the DSM I run, was one of those cars in the early 90s. It is now a very battle scarred, well worn. It is Uncle Iro.
Right.
He's probably a little paunchy, but I think later in the season he gets all ripped. So we're hoping we're in the ripped phase of this.
It's like that baseball glove that's older and worn in. It fits just right.
Yeah. What was interesting is actually at the last Lake Superior running. So Matt Hookey, the guy I bought the car from, he's like 6'3". I have no idea how the hell he fit in the car in the first place. But we finished the race right next to each other, and so we were talking. And I'd say, "Hey Matt, you should get in your old car." Because every once in a while he says, "I want to buy it back," and because it was his favorite, it was the easiest car to drive he ever had. Which I can say, yeah, it's a good one. So he origamied himself into the cage and sat down in the Halo seats with the lowered floor and the moved place and all that stuff. He's like, "Oh wow, I fit now." Like, yep, okay. Well, all we had to do is change the whole damn floor pan.
Right.
But
Design the car.
Yeah, so when I got to the end of the year, we were trying to decide, okay, what things do we have to fix? What things do we want to improve? Where do we get the bang for the buck, right? And I sat seriously on the bubble of, do I try to step up to an in-tracks level, real serious rally grade suspension, which would be call it an $8,000 or $10,000 uplift. And at the end of the day, I said, I don't think that 10 grand, buys me 20 points of speed factor, because let's say the car would be capable, but I'm not sure I have the will to put that much risk in the equation. Flying over those jumps and learning, hey, the car kind of rotates to the right and there's trees over there, but you won't know that until you're in the air. At the end of the day, the decision I made was, rather than trying to improve the car, if I'm going to spend that money, what I really should do is take the time, drag the car to Texas or to the East Coast or someplace where I could have access to land to practice with.
Okay.
Because the only time I get to drive the car is in competition. I don't have any place where I can practice different methods in a turn or anything like that. And that is now the biggest limiting factor.
That's true. I've never considered that there's not like a test and tune rally stage.
Well, there typically are test days you can sign up for, like on the day before the recce day. But then, that adds yet another day and cost and all that stuff. And where, if I could wave a magic wand, I would have access to some farm around here where they would say, hey, you could use the farm roads, pay us some money.
Right.
And we could spend a day putting the sway bars on, taking them off, changing the spring rates, changing the diff, lockup rates, and tuning the finer elements of the car, playing with alignments. Do you want, if you go with a toe out aspect to the rear, does that make it want to rotate in a better way? All that stuff that you can do at a track, because it's the same course every time and you can really iterate.
Yeah.
Where you can't in rally.
Even the same rally stage would be, different from year to year, right?
It's different from year to year. It's different from pass to pass.
Yeah.
Because let's say we're going to run the same stage twice. Sorry, my dog is chewing on a bone. I don't know if you can hear that. If you run the same stage twice, well, you're in a field of 70 cars.
Mm-hmm.
70 cars passing on a dirt road changes that dirt road tremendously.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing it 140 or 140 times passing it. So what was smooth when you made your notes becomes rough, becomes holy crap, where'd that 3-foot boulder come from that got kicked up by something?
Right.
It changes really significantly. Or, well, you took your notes and it was a nice sunny day, and now you're out there and it's sleeting and raining and lightning and trees falling, and there's so much variability that I don't know what my point was, but anyway, there's a lot of crap that happens. I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
No, I mean, I feel like you explained how, even from pass to pass, the course could change dramatically. And, that's it. Just because your course notes look one way from the beginning doesn't mean that's necessarily how it's going to be on your second pass.
Yeah, very much so.
So, Rob, we talked about a lot of, very much once in a lifetime kind of events and moments with this car. What would you say has been the most memorable rally event with this DSM? One that sticks out the most to you?
Oh, what do I think about there? I think probably for me, the rally in the 100-acre wood between Salem and Potosi is becoming my favorite event.
Okay.
It for a few dimensions. Both the town of Potosi and the town of Salem, which you sort of run the race in between these two towns, they both are very supportive, very engaged, very involved, very welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
The roads, as I said earlier, are utterly spectacular. Typically, when we're there, the weather is also pretty acceptable. And if my memory is accurate, some of my most correct, that I feel anyway, correctly executed turns tend to happen kind of on those road surfaces now. I mean, I would have traditionally said snowdrift, but I think I'm becoming more of a fan of 100-acre wood. One of these days, I would like to do Over Mountain to give that a try. There's but that it's either that or it's the Lake Superior Pro Rally at the end of the year with all the colors and all the stuff. Those are probably my two favorite events. And there are little snippets of handling brilliance that occur in those races.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Rob, for drag racers, we always, something sticks out to me about an upgrade or a modification that I tried that I would never go back to or never recommend to someone. For me, I think about there was a phase for a while where stroker motors were very popular. And for whatever reason, the 2.3 with my Autotrans, I just could not get the two to love each other. And therefore, I would never recommend a stroker motor for anyone in the future. And we see now in drag racing that almost no one is running them. So
really,
yes, these days it's atypical to find anyone still running a stroker. So when it comes to your DSM in particular and setting it up for rally racing, is there anything that sticks out in your mind that just did not work that you would never recommend to someone that's maybe wanting to attempt to race their DSM in one of these?
That's a good question. I think I would answer it this way, rather than being something specific like, uh, well, actually, it's a little bit similar to what you were just describing. So, because of the restrictor rules in rally, when you have a forced induction engine, the way the aerodynamics work with the restrictor and how it affects the turbo, a larger displacement engine, when using forced induction, is the wrong direction to go.
Mm.
So if you have a 2-liter 4G63 and you want to run, say, in the national class, you have to run an even smaller restrictor. You have to run a 33 millimeter orifice, and that's actually designed for an engine that's in the sort of 1.4 to 1.6 liter range.
Oh, wow.
So you'd want to de-stroke or otherwise lower the displacement to live with that turbo.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if somebody was starting off right now, you've got a listener who says, I think I want to do stage rally. Let's pretend for a moment they have a DSM with a blown up engine. What I would suggest is actually they put in a normally aspirated V6 and start you in the normally aspirated class, because the turbo cars, because of the expense related to this stuff, they're kind of dying off.
Okay.
In terms of the number of participants. And the hot ticket on the Subaru side is they take the 3-liter flat 6 from some Subaru model, normally aspirated, and then they put it in the WRX chassis, pick your year, and they go race that.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
And those cars are wicked fast. I would love to see somebody figure out how to make power with whatever the engine code is for the Mitsubishi V6 that bolts up to the DSM drive line.
Sure.
That's like a 6G70 something.
Yep.
But if somebody was starting off, I would say go normally aspirated. Don't go turbo. And then put gravel suspension on it, put the cage in it, put the skid plate on it, and that's enough to start. You really don't need 300 horsepower, 400 horsepower, because you can't use it as you're getting to learn it. Focus everything else on keeping the engine in its temperature range, keeping your brakes from lighting on fire, and get to the end of the race.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the game. If you have budget left over, buy tires. It only took me 20 years to figure that out.
Now, never myself having done this before, the rally discipline seems like one where seat time is probably more crucial than any other discipline. Would you say that that's fair?
I think as your speed factor increases, yeah, that's a function of seat time. If I think back to most people when they enter this sport, they start off when they're young and effectively have no money. It's like, hey, it's the college kid in a very strange set of circumstances. It's sort of the college people group together and go, we're going to run this car, whether it's a clapped out something or another. But that tends to be how people kind of get started. And if your budget allows for it and you said, okay, I want to get into rally. We're going to change the question slightly. If you said, I don't rally today, it looks really interesting. How do I get started? What would my advice be? Number one, buy your first car. Don't build it. Let somebody else have learned all the things that you're going to have to learn just on the construction and logbooking. So find a car that is logbooked, that you don't hate, but it's cheap enough that if you destroy it, you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, invest in getting some training, whether you go to Tim O'Neill's school out in the East Coast, or you go to Rally Ready, or you go to Dirtfish out on the West Coast. I think Rally Ready's down in Texas. Or you find somebody in Rally with a whole bunch of land and then some old clapped out rally cars, and you learn how to do it that way. But find some place to begin to be taught the skills. My first, I learned the rally driving techniques as an offshoot of the Audi club I was a part of, where we would go rent the Bridgestone ice driving track out in Steamboat for private events. And people like Scott and W.G. Giles, who was a national rally champion, taught me how to do some of these things. And then we had a place to iterate and practice and practice. These weren't competition cars, these were street cars, but the skills transfer. So, you know, go to your ice races and go to the places where you learn what happens to your car on low CF, low friction surfaces, because all the dynamics are the same. The speeds just get higher as the friction goes up.
Okay.
But yeah, to get started in rally, absolutely buy a logbook car. Don't build your first one. Even if it's, you know, the cheap way to get in the sport is find somebody's 2-wheel drive, something or another, front drive or rear drive, doesn't really matter. Kind of lowish horsepower that's cheap to race. Run that for a year or two. You'll pretty much be able to sell it what you bought it for, as long as you don't ball it up. And you'll get to learn all the other hard stuff about rally: the crew, the co-driver, the logistics, the what's involved in just doing these things.
Sure.
And then you'll also get a sense of, well, do I really need it to be a 4-wheel drive car? Do I maybe want a 2-wheel drive? What do I want? Where do I want to go? What part about this do I love, or do I hate it?
Okay. Well, Rob, I think that a lot of listeners, they're very familiar with the DSM, but very few, I would imagine, are going to be familiar with taking it through these rally stages. What's maybe something that most people don't realize about rally racing at DSM?
Specific to a DSM, I that's a tough one to answer. I would guess that most of your listeners who are familiar with a DSM would probably assume that the transmission is the weak point. I haven't really experienced that myself. I should say, with all the times I had to have Tim rebuild my transmission, it wasn't because it broke. It was because it was, crunching going in and out of gears. The synchros were destroyed.
Sure.
And it was starting to take out the gears. But, we could always get to the end of the race. Heat control, I think on a DSM, I had somebody recently say to me, look, you want these engines to last, get it to 185 Fahrenheit and keep it there. So, being able to, and I'm going to make a gross assumption. I'm not a drag guy, but I'm guessing that the amount of time that you're building heat in the engine and the heat soaking the oil and the coolant and everything else is pretty short, because it's just the wait to the run and then the run.
Yeah.
But on a stage rally day, you're doing, foot to the floor. You're doing constant accelerations, essentially constant mini drag races for many, many, many miles at a time, and also trying to slow down from that. So you put all that heat into the engine, you put all that heat into the tires, and you put all that heat into the brakes, and you do it over and over and over and over, back to back to back to back. So probably the thing that's people are the least familiar with is that when you get to go to service, you're time boxed for how long you can be in there. And Sometimes that's a 15 minutes, sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 40. It's almost never longer than an hour. And you really have to be thoughtful about, with the time you have in service, what can you address and what can you tolerate to not address.
Yeah.
Those are kind of difficult things to do, to learn, I guess I should say.
Sure. I mean, having to prioritize what you're going to work on and what you're not going to work on, that has to be something that comes with experience.
Yeah, they're lesson learned. While it's not a DSM, when I first raced an Audi 200 chassis, which is a big sedan, I kept breaking the rear exhaust hangers, so this big long exhaust pipe kept flopping around and everything. And 3 times in the 3 services, my mechanics tried to fix it, and finally the lead mechanic got so pissed off that for some reason I had 3 or 4 hacksaw blades in the toolbox, and he grabbed those things and twisted them around the exhaust and drove a bolt through the frame and said, "There, break that." And it was fine right up until we hit the tree. So the things that will wear, it's difficult to predict. But I, like I said, in the DSMs, it's kind of the rear lower control arms. As a matter of fact, if your listeners have any rear lower control arms from, nice out west cars that aren't all beat to hell, I might need a few of those, because ours are getting pretty beat up. And there's not a big pile of them that I have sitting in my spares that aren't, rusty from stuff here in the Midwest.
Is there not an aftermarket option for those?
I don't know. I'm only now just beginning to look. I mean, probably somebody makes some sort of chromoly thing. But I haven't, gone there. This car had, spherical bearings and other stuff in spots where rubber used to be.
Right.
So there's some figuring out what can we use, but anyway, it's just the sand and the dirt and the mud and the rocks are gonna do things to your car that you just cannot anticipate.
Yeah.
And probably the one thing that most racers wouldn't think about is, in rally, you absolutely need a heater and you absolutely need a defroster.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably not on a lot of people, their brain, when they're thinking of rally racing.
The very first rally car I owned was a 1976 Mitsubishi Colt.
Oh wow!
So the rear drive, long nose.
Yeah.
I bought it out of Louisiana, rallied it. We took it, dragged it back to Illinois. We went to Headwaters, which is an early May race at that time in Minnesota. And it was a rainy, cold night with 2 fat guys breathing heavy in this car out on stage in the dark, only to realize not only did it not have a defogger, it didn't have any HVAC, heater core. All of that stuff was just blocked off. Like, it didn't even occur to me to look for it. And we're driving, and I'm trying to reach forward with like a chamois to try and clear the fog off the window of our heavy breathing so I could see where the hell we were driving.
Oh my gosh.
Only to swipe with the chamois and realize that we were 6 feet away with our nose pointed into a crowd, foot to the floor in the middle of a turn.
Oh.
Which all worked, and the turn looked spectacular. It was a moment of blind luck, but yeah, for racing, you absolutely have to have a way to defog that windshield.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Now, Rob, I know early on in this you said that probably top of the list for future plans is to find a fix for the power steering situation. And you said adding another bar to the cage to
Yep.
apply. Is there any other future plans or upgrades that you have planned for the car?
I think we will probably modify our race mode switch. So one of the things that we've got set up is I have a switch that sets the car into transit mode or race mode, and race mode does a few things. It uh, forces the fans onto a 100% duty cycle. It sends the start signal to the onboard cameras. It starts the data logging, to the bigger memory piles and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And I think I would like to have the ability to decide whether or not to turn on anti-lag, which we haven't activated yet. We really haven't had a need. Launch control we use, but anti-lag we don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm getting to the point where that may become necessary. And then I would like the ability to have essentially a knob where I could control the amount of boost that the wastegate will give me.
Okay.
Because there are times when the surface is loose enough or icy enough that the car spools too much too quickly, and while that's fun, it's not exactly accelerating us the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to be able to sort of dial a boost, if you will. The challenge, of course, is how do you doing that without creating the temptation to have an illegal amount of boost. But that's all on the software, and then if we run boost monitors, that'll be fine. So I think those are probably the main changes. The only other thing would actually be I've noticed a number of the higher prepped cars actually run windshield defroster, like electronic elements across their windscreens.
Huh.
Like you have on the back window, but it's on the front.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that may be something I want to look into.
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
And then, okay, if I'm being a real picky about things, since I have to carry 120 pounds of ballast, I got to figure out something better to do with those 120 pounds instead of having literal weightlifting plates bolted into the back of the car.
Yeah.
So
use that.
I would be very tempted to spend that weight on a 12-volt air conditioner system to blow cool air in the car. Because let me tell you, a rally car on stage in August is hell.
I can't.
It is hotter than hot, and you're in a multi-layer fire suit and all the gear, and we can't flow enough air into that car to cool down ourselves. So those would be the main things I would change.
Okay.
Money, no object.
Well, Rob, what events can we see you and this car in action in 2026?
Our plan at this point, if we can finish the cage uplift or the cage editions and solve this bloody power steering problem, I still can't believe I just said that sentence, will be Headwaters in May. So that's a regional rally in Minnesota in the Detroit Lakes area. And then we plan to do Lake Superior and Ojibwa. So Lake Superior is up in Marquette, and then Ojibwa is the other Minnesota rally that's a national 2-day one. That's kind of the current plan. There's an option of possibly doing one of the NASA rallies, either Cup or Hardwood or Iron Mule. I forget the name of it. But that all depends on my crew availability, etc. But first things first, we can't race it all until the cage is updated, because we got a notation in our logbook at Lake Superior last year, and we used up the one. Let us race with the notation to try and make the championship. Okay. So we're out of grace period, and we cannot race until we're done with the cage stuff.
Understood. And Rob, where can people find and follow you on social media so they can keep up with your rally events and seeing a DSM do something that not a lot of people get to see?
Well, I'm probably the least social media savvy guy, but the I have our in-car videos up on YouTube, and it's Rally Dog is one word, so RALLYDOG space racing, and you'll probably see a guy in a winter hat and a beard as the icon, but then you'll see the races and the stages, and those are just the raw roll cage mounted camera and intercom feed between the co-driver and myself, for all the stages that I've captured it for. And if you watch it, it covers a couple of years. We've gotten a little bit more sophisticated with our video editing, but there's that. And then I think on Facebook, it's under my name or Rally Dog Racing. I honest to God don't know. We need somebody who knows how to do this sort of stuff, like you MitsuTimes guys, to help us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely down to help with that. And then, Rob, at the end, I always give people a chance to give a thanks or a shout out to anybody who's helped them out along the way, help get their car where it is. Is there anybody that you want to give a thanks or a shout out to?
Oh yeah, no, much like couldn't possibly do this without the co-driver and the crew. There is no way I'd be competing at the level I'm doing or the amount I'm doing if it weren't for Colin's efforts in 608 Motorworks. He not only is he providing me an excellent service at a reasonable value, he is very capable and very dedicated, and he's a huge part of why I can still race. In addition to Eli and Kyle and Kevin and Betsy and the people that are on the team, as Colin is himself. But there's Colin on my team and Colin who runs 608 Motorworks. While they're the same human, they're two different roles, and he excels at both. So I would give a wholehearted 2 thumbs up for the quality coming out of 608 Motorworks, and then the capabilities that Rally.build, access to Rally.build allows for. I suppose I should make it clear they don't sponsor me, but they are who I do business with.
Okay. Well, Rob, it's been an absolute honor to have you on here. I know we've been trying to link up and do this for a while, and I appreciate your patience and certainly time for coming on here and sharing your story. I think a lot of people are going to really like this and get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, thanks again, and I hope you have a great night. I'm going to get this over to you, and we'll get it out and share it with the world.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.